This is a video on Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine, Chapter 17, The Divine Soul, and Chapter 18, Mind and Supermind. Hello, this is Wake Up Chris speaking with a video about Sri Aurobindo's The Life Divine, Chapter 17 and 18, The Divine Soul and Mind and Supermind. After the first 16 chapters, Sri Aurobindo comes to the conclusion that the human being must have a divine soul, which is basically a divine spark. It is that which links us to the infinite absolute divine, and thus we have access to the infinite immortal absolute divine, with all its harmony and divine existence and bliss and consciousness and force. He says that this divine soul, because it has this direct link to the divine, never departs from truth and oneness, never falls from the inherent light and the natural harmony of its divine existence. It always stays undivided, unbaffled, unerring, unperverted by any stimulus of ignorant desire. And it is also the part of us that gets reincarnated again and again. And even if we consciously forget everything, this divine soul, unperverted, unchanged, will reincarnate again and again, and it cannot suffer. The soul can never suffer, can never be harmed, because it is part of the absolute infinite. And at the same time, because it is part of the absolute divine, there is a gulf between the two choices that this leads us to, which are either to dwell in the multiplicity, exiled from the direct and entire consciousness of the one, or to dwell in the unity, repellent of the consciousness of the many, which means either we stay in the oneness, but then we cannot perceive what happens in the multiplicity, or we stay in the multiplicity, but then we can't feel the unity of the oneness. And of course, once we are embodied, this is exactly what happened and what is happening. We cannot feel the oneness anymore, because we have identified with the multiplicity, with the manifestation, with matter. So what it does and what it did to the soul is what has been strangely formulated into original sin in some religions. It's not a sin, it's not a fall from paradise, but it is a deviation from the truth and from the spirit and from the oneness and its integrality and harmony and all these other attributes like Satchitananda. For it was a great plunge into ignorance, which is the soul's adventure in the world, and from which was born our suffering and aspiring humanity. So this plunge into ignorance on purpose, so that we can experience the manifestation, the matter, the multiplicity, has two consequences. One consequence is suffering, and the other one is aspiration. Suffering from the ignorance and from the identification with matter, and at the same aspiring to get back to the oneness, which is our soul's adventure. For some reason that is not possible for us to grasp, because we are already in the separation, in the identification, in the plunge into ignorance. We're already at the bottom. So we cannot see behind our limitations, because we are in the limitation. We are already limited. But for some reason, this is what pure consciousness does. It plunges itself into ignorance to find itself again, which is a great plunge, a great adventure. And recently I put out a video about some funny reincarnation playbook by Scott Meredith, and there will be another video also to see this a little bit from the light side. Because when we are honest to ourselves, we don't really feel this oneness, this bliss. So the Vedic seers, they write about it and we think, okay, yeah, it makes sense, but really, I don't feel it. It may be fun for the divine, but it's not for me. It's nice that the divine, infinite, absolute enjoys this and experiences bliss by this, but I don't. And it's nice that the Vedic seers write about it and other sages, and Sri Aurobindo writes about it, but what does that have to do with my day-to-day experience? And this is a topic Sri Aurobindo talks about in chapter 18, Mind and Supermind. In this state of being divorced from the Brahman or universe, we have three. We don't have Satchitananda as a daily experience. We have body, mind, and life as a daily experience. Our body and our mind experiences life. And it experiences life by a lot of suffering. It's not a very nice experience. So maybe this experience will be obvious again once we die and whatever happens between lives. But as long as we are in this body, what to do? He writes, mind cannot possess the infinite. It can only suffer it or be possessed by it. It can only lie blissfully helpless under the luminous shadow of the real, cast down on it from planes of existence beyond its reach. The possession of the infinite cannot come except by an ascent to those supramental planes. Nor can the knowledge of it come except by an inert submission of mind to the descending messages of the truth consciousness reality. So the truth consciousness reality is sending messages down to us into the abyss of ignorance. And we can receive those, and we can ascend, so to say, to the planes beyond the mind, the supramental planes beyond the mind. Although we are in the mind, there's still a possibility to receive those messages, surrender to them, and thus ascend towards beyond the mind. But of course, these messages get scrambled all the time. Maya is scrambling the messages, as is very nicely exemplified by the Matrix movies. We have some kind of weird thing built into us that doesn't seem to be helpful in understanding the messages of the universe. We get distracted all the time by our mind. Our mind somehow doesn't work well. It's somehow blindfolded. It receives some messages, but not others, not the really important ones. Somehow built into Maya, into the illusion of matter and multiplicity, there's not only an obstacle built in for us, a blindfolding, to not see through the veils of Maya, but there's also built into us a possibility to see through it. It seems to be a rare thing to happen, but it can happen. The possibility in creation is there. The possibility for intuition and direct knowledge. And to get there, we somehow have to have a real relationship with the life we live, with the body we experience, and with the mind we experience. These are the three things we have: the body, the mind, the life. So it's not really too helpful to just condemn the body and condemn the mind and saying, I'm not the body and I'm not the mind. It's true that you're not only the body, not only the mind, but you're also the body and you're also the mind. So to just totally ignore them and see them as evil or hurdles or obstacles is also not really helpful, because it separates us from the only tools we have. We only have these three tools to get to the supramental. To get beyond the mind, we have to use the body and the mind and our life. It's not about escaping, it's about going deeper into it and really experience the body and the mind with all its facets and all its pros and cons. On the one hand, we're helplessly limited, and on the other hand, we are free. Free also to be limited or to be less limited. We choose to be deluded and deceived by our own play and by the play of Maya, and we use the creativity of our mind to distract us. The problem with the mind is that it sees everything as pieces. Everything it sees, it cuts into pieces and then tries to understand the pieces and then thinks it's the whole. But that's not how it works. On the other hand, because we have this strongly analytical mind, we can use this strongly analytical mind to really follow its dual logic to its end. The mind sees everything as an individualized form from its own viewpoint, excluding all other viewpoints and all other individualized souls. This exclusive concentration creates all kinds of other problems. But if you, for example, concentrate on the opposite, that everything is one in the end, and that all beings have the same value, and all viewpoints have the same value, and all is really the divine, see what happens. Treat every plant, every animal, every other human being, everything as the divine, as valuable as you are or consider yourself, and see what happens. But then we have another problem. Not only are we identified with our mind, we are also identified with our body. We might reject our body or don't like our body, but we're still identified with it and with its sensations and its pain in this gross material world and form. And then these two things have to work together and create a dynamic action, and sometimes this works well and sometimes it doesn't. But here we can do the same thing. We can feel into our bodies, really feel into it, not try to escape all the time or try to ignore it all the time. No, just as with the mind you can follow to its last logical end, same you can do with the body. Feel into the body and see what the last logical conclusion is of really feeling, really sensing, really experiencing your body. This is consciousness. Not to try to not feel your mind and your body, but really go deep into it and see, how do these things actually work? How do they function? What are the pros and cons? What can I do with it? What can I not do with it? What it is for? By your own experience and own sensations, not those of others, not listening to others, but really going into it and produce your self-knowledge by yourself, through the tools you have, life, body, mind. In the end, even your mind and even your bodies, they are instruments of the divine. And as such, they're not only instruments of Maya, but also instruments of Satchitananda, of the infinite absolute truth. So instead of just searching for the supramental or for enlightenment or whatever you call it out there, look in there. It must be in there somewhere, not out there. Because that's all you have. You have your body, your mind, and your life, which are all limited, but still they are divine instruments. And you can straighten them up. Now they may be perverted or crooked or limited, everything chopped up and analyzed to death, but you can straighten them up and they will become better instruments than before. So what we're really doing often is the divine gives us 3 instruments, let's say a knife, a hammer, and a duct tape, and then we're looking for other instruments all the time that are better than these 3 instruments, Instead of finding out what you can do with a hammer, knife and duct tape. There's a lot to do with those things. So find out what you can do with it or with them. Instead of always looking into someone else's toolbox and think, oh, their tools are better than mine. That's all you have. You have your body, your mind, and your life. And you might get other tools later, like intuition and direct knowledge and such, but only after using your tools you have at your disposal now. And this struggle to get out of this ignorance and to learn how to use this tool is the force of the universe and is the delight of the universe and is part of the existence of the universe. And even death is also part of the universe. So in the next few chapters, Sri Aurobindo will explain these tools that we have and this experience that we go through, like life and death and desire and incapacity. The next few chapters will be more about how life works and how we experience and perceive it usually. For we really have to get at the root of things, not just long for something larger, something bigger, something more comfortable, but to really see life as it is and then go from there. And by this exploring, the body will get stronger, and by this exploring, the mind will get more and more silent, and you will learn when to and how to use these two main tools we got. So don't run away from your body and your mind, but run towards them, befriend them, really get them to know. Like two friends or two guests. Yes, these two friends or two guests might be a little bit crazy and perverted, but they're here now, and we better get to know them and get into a good relationship with them. This is very, very important in the integral yoga, and it's a very big difference to other yogas. Or maybe not. Maybe this is really the Hatha yoga in the integral yoga, or the original meaning of Hatha yoga, to really get to know your body, not to reign over your body like a king, not to subjugate your body like some kind of subject or underling, but really to get to know it, to bring the consciousness into the body, into each and every cell. Everything that we call undivine or bad or evil must somehow be also an action or manifestation of the divine principles themselves. It cannot be otherwise, because there is only the divine. There is only the perfect, infinite, absolute. There can be nothing undivine. This is also called purification in some Indian traditions. But it's not really to purify the body as if it was something dirty or something sinful or evil. It's just a little bit confused. And we can straighten it up like a balled up or crinkled towel or sheet. So somewhere in there must already be the perfection of the divine infinite. Yes, somehow it's perverted and crooked, but on the other hand, there is only the perfect divine. So somewhere in us, it must be possible to find it. And this is what he calls involution. There's not only an evolution, but also an involution, in which we go inside and look for the oneness that we actually are, and from whence we came. So on the one hand, we have this illusion of separation, and on the other hand, we have this drive growing towards it, to grasp it. And it not being something outside, because we're not separate from God. We just have this illusion that we're separate from the divine. It's like we look in the wrong direction and we just have to turn in the right direction, in which we are already pulled. If we only listen to it, if we only follow the flow, if we only follow our intuition, then we will look in the right direction and things will straighten up and become more clear. And the way to do this with the mind, somehow we have to work with the mind. We cannot be totally independent of it. So why not use it? It's one of the tools we got. And the way to use the mind for this involution is to focus on the vast, on the spaceless, on the infinite. Yeah? In some ways we have to zoom in. Yeah? In the body we have to zoom in. In the mind we have to zoom out. And when I say have to, I don't mean have to. You don't have to do anything. You can just enjoy being in the ignorance. That's valid too. We all pull towards ignorance for some reason, but we also pull towards knowledge and away from ignorance for some reason. The finite is an appearance of the infinite. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me on Facebook and Patreon. Thank you for sharing the videos with your friends, and see you soon.